reasoning behind that? Is there, I don't remember that being discussed at any time.
Well, it's been discussed since the very beginning of this legislation. In fact, prior to even filing it, it was my intent to ultimately have one bill that we negotiate. As you know, in this process, it's easier to defend one fortress than to guard two. And although I've had to run both of these through the gauntlet of multiple committees, I think at this point it makes a lot of sense because we have addressed many of the separate questions that have been addressed in both the healthcare side and the business side. It makes sense now as we come in for a landing to land one piece of legislation, to negotiate with the House on one piece of legislation, so that we are not putting ourselves in a situation where we could be held hostage on one but pass the other. I think it's important that we have both the business community and the healthcare community rowing with us together in the same ship. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll rise in opposition to the amendment. The reality is, you may have been cited 3 years ago, you may have fixed it, you may have now the best standards in the country in your nursing home. And under Senator Thurston's provision, you would still be liable because you were cited 2 years and 300 days ago, even if you had done everything else right since then. Simple truth is, this was not the nursing homes didn't create this virus. They were struggling to find PPE for months in these nursing homes. PPE was a shower cap, a homemade mask, and a trash bag. The best test that we had was a thermometer, which I think we can all agree is a very crude tool for a COVID test. But that's what they had. And then we put standards on them, and we asked them to do certain things, and we asked them to lock down their residents, but we told them they had to maintain staffing levels, and we told them that they had to continue to care for residents. And to my knowledge, not one nursing home in the state of Florida pushed their residents to the curb and said, we can no longer keep you safe. We can no longer take care of you. They powered through this. And they struggled through it. We asked them to MacGyver their way through a global pandemic. And they were there, and they did the best they could for the residents they had. They were there for our family members on the front end of this. We've got to be there for them on the back end of this. And so I would ask you to vote this amendment down. Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with COVID, and we're dealing with new variants that seem to pop up every week, whether it's Brazil or Germany or England or China. We hear about new variants of COVID. We don't know of the effectiveness of this vaccine against these new variants. In fact, unfortunately, there's some data that suggests that the vaccine may not help with certain of these variants. And so we need to watch this very closely. I think it would be imprudent at this time to sunset this as we're dealing with still so many unknowns as it relates to this virus. This legislature will be back here next year. It will be back the year after that. We can address it at that time. But right now, I don't support the amendment now, so we vote it down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are, in some cases, good reasons to provide protections to healthcare providers. But those protections don't need to last forever. As I said earlier, this bill addresses a unique situation, something none of us have ever faced in our lifetime. The court system is set up in a way to be flexible, and the underlying standard of care, the requirement that one use reasonable care, is so elegant in its application, and it accounts for so many different factors. So when we make a change like this, that's such a dramatic change in the law, I don't think it should be forever. Previous iterations of SB 74 included a similar provision, but the strike all removed them. Simply put, the protections that have existed in the law for centuries should and need to remain. And if we're going to do something as dramatic as we're doing in this bill, we should sunset it in a year. And if, in fact, the problem persists, then we can undo that sunset. So I would ask for your favorable support.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment will do nothing to help our state fully reopen and recover from the pandemic. The purpose of this bill is to recognize that in a world of incomplete information about COVID-19 and ever-changing contradictory guidance, people, businesses, and other entities need protection from opportunistic sue and settle lawsuits. By requiring plaintiffs to present higher quality evidence and show the defendant's conduct was grossly negligent, we strongly discourage sue and settle opportunistic lawsuits while allowing other lawsuits against bad actors to proceed. I would ask you vote no on this amendment.
Senator Farmer, you're recognized to close on your amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill eliminates the existing rights of Floridians to recover when they are negligently infected by COVID and would allow recovery only if the business or healthcare entity acted with gross negligence. Gross negligence is an extremely high standard. It means that someone acted with reckless disregard for another human being's life or for the safety of the people exposed to the dangerous effects of COVID. It's really akin or essentially the same as a manslaughter standard in a criminal case. So it's a really high bar. Current law provides, of course, for recovery for negligent conduct, where a business failed to use reasonable care. What a reasonably prudent business person or healthcare provider would do under similar circumstances. If PPE is not available, it's not unreasonable to not have obtained it. So the standard works. In cases where the ability to recover would be allowed, the clear and convincing evidentiary standard places such a high burden on the evidence. So you've got two things happening in this bill. You've got to prove gross negligence, and now you've got to prove that high manslaughter type standard, not just by a preponderance of the evidence, but by the higher burden of clear and convincing evidence. And that is one of the highest burdens we have in the law. So you're changing both the standard by which the defendants will be judged and the evidence necessary, the level of evidence necessary to prove that standard. It's just too much, and it's not fair to consumers who may be victims of COVID due to someone else's negligence. I would ask for your favorable support.